Hello, hello. We are about to go live in just a second. I am.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Candace?
Doing well. Now, are you using your name on? I don't know your name, or are you
My
just
name
going by
my name is Matan. I don't have it on my profile, but if I'm speaking to someone like you, I would want to share my name. So yeah, Matan.
Matan?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Nice to meet you for I guess for real, but
Yeah.
not really, virtually for the first time.
A bit closer. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me see. I wanted to see if I had a few people that could be moderators that came into my live. Um, but I don't
You
know if
gonna
anyone's here
ask
yet.
you how to do that because I tried my last live and I just like I told you I'm technologically inept, so it's a bit.
Cause we're gonna be kind of in the same boat because like I'm so new. So what I found is if you click on their name, then you can go to like these three little dots, I think, and then you can like moderate. You can say it's something like manage. And then
Oh,
please can you say hello in French? Bonjour. Then you can like make them a moderator from that point.
I
So
see
yeah.
that. Okay. So
But don't
I mean,
ask me to say anything else in French. I don't speak French.
that's interesting. Right
Yeah.
now, three people on. So if anybody wants to be moderator out of the three or five of you that are here, just let me know and I can make you a moderator. But yeah, I wanted to actually start by kind of highlighting our similarities more than before we start tackling our differences.
Sure.
Because I think there's a lot of them. For one, I see us. I think we've done some of the same work on TikTok in different areas, but I think deconstructing different beliefs and showing how that's not necessarily the idea that we're looking at, and kind of undoing toxic theology as in general is I think I can assume that we're both in that arena.
Absolutely.
So how did you start on TikTok, and then I'm going to ask you something else, but how did you start exactly?
I've only been on TikTok a few months. I guess since May, maybe May, June time frame. My wife was like, "Hey, you need to be on TikTok. That's the new thing." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll I'll try it out." It took a while though, and I started trying it out and came to like it. So that's kind of how I started off.
And were you doing work like this just, I mean, in your own life? Are you a pastor? Are you in
Mhm.
clergy somehow?
Yeah, I'm a pastor. I'm in Savannah, Georgia, and I'm a pastor. I have been a pastor since 2000, and well, we opened the doors on in 2009. So I've been doing this work, and I've been doing justice work for pretty much that same amount of time. As far as LGBTQ inclusion, of course, African American, uh, civil rights and that sort of thing,
Right.
all in my thing. Yeah.
That's an
So yeah, and I've taken a lot of time in study as far as it relates to Christianity and and the scriptures and what they say regarding LGBT people,
yeah.
um, and the fact that they're so horribly used to condemn people from the LGBT community, and so that's been my work, and so I've just brought that to Facebook, to TikTok, basically.
That's awesome.
And thank you, Sam. Thank you.
Yeah, I really like so much of what you do, and the way you frame it is very entertaining, and it's also not just entertaining. I think it helps. It really can help a person um, like open their eyes and like truly understand, because they're that person that you are in character, right? And you're
Hmm.
basically saying the exact same thing that they're saying, and so you're engaging in that dialogue and showing them the other side of the story, and how they really sound when they say
Right.
those, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's kind of the point, to show them kind of how ignorant they sound, and then to also empower. And thank you all so much for the roses. To also empower the person who stands in the shoes of the one receiving the negative message, to what to kind of say
Yeah.
to refute that negativity. And if not in person, then because I honestly don't feel like we need to even engage in these arguments, like for real, in real life. I would better than just walk away from from those conversations. If it
Mhm.
was a real life situation where the mother is like this, that, and the other, I'm gonna throw up the deuces and be gone. Like, honestly, like, not because I don't have a response, but I don't feel like it's worth my time and
But
energy.
it's because you do have a response. I think it's because you know and you're confident in what you believe that you can say, you know what, I'm out. And
Exactly.
can now give that power to other people, to your followers, and so that they can have that same, confidence and yeah, inner
Yep.
security.
Exactly. Love
Very
that inner security. That's exactly what I. Yep. Hmm.
wow, that's great. I personally did not. I don't. I'm not any clergy member. I'm not a rabbi. I have been a teacher to Jewish youth for, I think it's about 5 or 6 years, and I've been in a um, youth. I don't know what the name is in English, but it's a youth outreach within our community. We
Hmm.
try to bring Jews who are more secular or not so in touch with their roots, with their traditions. We try to bring them closer to their tradition by exposing them to the Sabbath observance and the different holidays and all the great stuff that makes being a Jew like amazing. And so
Right.
I've been in that organization that for my gosh, since like as a member since the 6th grade, and then
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah,
Cool.
that's actually what got me started becoming religious. I wasn't always religious. I was brought up secular, traditional, and when I was 18, after many years of um, questioning and struggling within this organization, I decided to keep Shabbat fully in when I was about 18, and that's how everything just started going from there. Um, and I was brought up in and became religious in the Orthodox Jewish community. Now it's very different from what you might see. The the majority of what you see on TikTok are not Orthodox Jews. They are uh, Reformed, conservative, or secular, completely without any, not affiliated to any denomination because maybe they're atheist or they just don't really care. There are
Mm.
many different flavors of Judaism, just like there are obviously many different flavors of Christianity. Um, but I started noticing that a lot of how they frame Torah and religious observance and belief was very appealing to me, and helped me also see that a lot of the beliefs that I was taught um, ended up being pretty toxic for me personally, and I can see the toxicity, the potential, the great potential for toxicity and trauma in other people's lives as well. And so I started looking into those ideas more, and then presenting them on TikTok. And with that journey, I myself have deconstructed and am deconstructing. Um, yeah, so that's kind of my journey on TikTok. I mean, besides that, I sing and I talk about Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, because that's something that's very important to me and a very big connector to Judaism for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So I really appreciate you inviting me to have a discussion, because I don't know, you probably couldn't see what I put as far as my video, whatever. You have to put like a describe your video description.
Right.
My video says, when you know better, and it has dot 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 because it wouldn't allow me to write the rest of it, which is you do better. And so I know a lot of people have come into my live and they're like, what's going on, or whatever. So let me just address the fact that there's a problematic video. If you're not my friend, then you can't see it. But there's a problematic video that I posted right before the Jewish holiday of Rosh Hashanah, a day before. And it became extremely controversial. I did not expect it to, because I did not know. And so what I've done is wrong. I've appropriated Jewish culture, albeit, accidentally. But when we do things, regardless of what they are and whether you did them on purpose or not, it's important that when people express to you that there is a concern, that is, well, it's important to me, I'll say, that you listen and you do better. You learn, and then you do better regarding it. And so that's why we're here, so that we can have an open discussion. And I forgot your name just that quick. I'm sorry.
Matan.
Matan.
Yes.
Matan has invited me to do a shared live as we're doing, so we can discuss some of these things, because there's issues there, like I'm not like this lone ranger, like this one person. There is issues here, and so we needed to kind of want to discuss them and bring them to light and talk about them a little bit, and hopefully we learn something. I know I will, and hopefully those that are tuned in will learn something, and we move forward from there in a positive and united way.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate how you saw that. At least, I want to speak about the nuances, because there are nuances. It's not strictly, this is cultural appropriation. I'm going to get into that. And I think that maybe some of my Jewish followers might not necessarily like what the kind of compromise that I want to make, which is not necessarily a compromise. It's just kind of looking at the whole
Right. Big picture.
Right, the big picture. Um, but a lot of people, most people, all of us, when we get criticism, it's really difficult to not get defensive and to right away just be like, no, this is what, and I wasn't, and I didn't mean this, not why my intent. And but
that's
but
how I responded at first. I'll admit that's how I responded at first.
But it shows character to even go back after and say, listen, I can see that there is that impact and intent are two different things, and that my intent might have been, and I see that. You are definitely not one of the people that wholeheartedly and without any pretense erase Judaism and say this is completely crap and we are it and da da da. But
right. No.
And the only reason why I brought it up is because I see that you are a person that is able to kind of see past the personal thing, right, of criticism. I wanted to say something else and I completely forgot. Yeah, and I also am here to learn, because and I think that a big part of this, a big reason why people are having such visceral, reactions to this, is might be because of lack of education. I don't necessarily understand or am super familiar with your denomination or sect of Christianity and what they believe and why you feel it's important to celebrate, to practice Christianity the way you do, digging into the roots of Christianity, bringing in some things that are in our Bible. And I want to stress that it is our Bible, because yes, we don't have the New Testament, but if you put an Old Testament translation and the Hebrew, the Torah, the 5 books of Moses translation together, you will not really find many differences at all. So the fact that you want to take things and practice things that are from your Bible, I can understand that. We just have to try to see what makes sense, what is sensitive to the religion that's actually there, that's practicing all of these things also. So yeah, I wanted to ask you what sect are you in, and what exactly do you believe?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I was gonna say something because something you brought up it skipped my mind just that quick. Um, uh, Let me answer your question, and then I'll get back to whatever
Yeah.
I was thinking. Um, but I'm non-denominational. So within Christianity, and so I would say Protestant. So within Christianity, there was a split. There was the Catholic Church was pretty much the overall main church at one point in time, where kind of like everybody was a part of, the Catholic Church. Eventually, what we call the Protestant Reformation happened, where the church had taken a real hard swing to the opposite direction of what we really should be, and they started doing some really not so cool stuff. And I think everybody knows about some of the stuff the Christians were doing at the time. And so we split. And so there's Protestant Christian, there's Catholic. And so Catholic will say, and they wouldn't be wrong, that they're kind of like the original. And then the Protestants are a branch off. And so I'm Protestant. Um, and I'm also non-denominational, because then the Protestants began to you kind of infight on the little things regarding scripture and what it meant. And so then you got your Baptist, and you got your, Pentecostal, and all of these different denominations of Protestant Christianity. But then you have people like me who are like, yeah, I personally don't believe in telling someone what their small doctrinal differences should be. So there are things within our religion that are really up for interpretation. Little stuff, it has nothing to do with the foundations of our faith, but it's all this little stuff, like how we should be baptized. Should we be baptized in like the name of Jesus, or should we be baptized in the Father, Son, Holy Ghost? Like that's really a thing and an argument, and whole
Right.
people have split off, you know. So I'm non-denominational, where I don't believe we need to tell people what they should believe. We give them the information, allow them to still be in community with us while they figure it out for themselves.
Right. Okay. Wow. So yeah, I am aware of the split. I'm not, um, it gets from what I've heard, it gets so confusing. The almost hundreds of different denomination, even within the Catholic, denominations, there are so many split offs, and within the
Mm-hmm.
Protestant, so many split offs, and it's hard to keep track of who believes in what.
Right.
I was reading about, I think, Pentecostal or Seventh Day Adventists that believe that you need to be baptized in the Holy Spirit, um, and that 7 Day Adventists, which is what I thought you were, because
Mm-hmm.
I think they're part of their doctrine that is different from other Christians, is they believe in observance of the Sabbath
Right.
and the
Habit first.
holidays.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, so it's interesting. You're non-denominational. Okay, so then how did you? So then did you yourself come to the realization that you should be keeping the holidays, like the three um, pilgrimages? I'm trying to find the English words because it's all Hebrew to me.
Right. Right. So when I started studying back in 2004, I read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation to start with, to get a foundation to understand. And when I read what we call Old Testament, or your scriptures, the portions that are Jewish, I understood very quickly that if this is part of our book, there's some type of connection. There's a reason. Like, we don't have the Quran in our book, so there's a reason why this particular scripture is in our supposed Christian scripture. And so in reading it, God makes it really clear these are lasting ordinances for you and all generations to come after you. And part of what is taught in the New Testament is that when you are, we believe as Christians, we're the bride of Christ. And just like any bride that, well, back in those times, a bride normally takes on whatever religion the husband has.
Right.
That's kind of the way that it's designed to work. It doesn't work that way now. It's modern times. But back then, that was the thought, that the bride is then engrafted into the family of whatever, person that is the husband. And so that's where the connection is made of, okay, so when God, who we believe we worship the same God. I know some people say, no, we don't, but I believe I worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you know. And so I believe that when God said those words, this is a lasting ordinance for you and everybody that comes after you, that also included me. That it's like, okay, this is something from God. Like, it's not something from like man or whatever. Like, I truly believe those words went from God's mouth to, to Moses's ears, to his pen, and, or however it got written down, oral tradition to the pen or whatever. And those were actually holidays, holy days, holy festivals that God instituted for a reason. And then to ignore them would be problematic for those of us that say we believe in him. That he doesn't say much, as far as like, set this day aside, set this time aside, set this time aside, and after that, live your life, like that sort of thing. And so it's like, if he's making such a point about these holy days as being something special, I think they are, and so that's where it came for me. Now, with better understanding that some of these holy days and holy traditions, because as they are written, it really doesn't say much other than don't work. Like, all y'all come over here, don't work, make an assembly. It doesn't really have the nits and the grits of how you are to celebrate
It's
written
extremely
in.
vague. It is extremely vague. Yes.
Right, extremely vague. And so, where I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there has been a lot of building and developing since the time that it was spoken to today. Some of that up until Jesus's time that he would have observed, and then some beyond, and that's where I'm understanding some beyond. And the portions perhaps that were, you know, built during his time and before, okay, but the stuff after is definitely a don't touch, no, it's not, and so I'm coming to that understanding in just even reading the comments and want to know more, honestly.
So the part about being grafted in, that was something that a concept that I was struggling with the first time I heard it. I did not understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So now I get it, and it's interesting that Christians consider themselves the bride of Christ because the Jewish people consider themselves the bride of God,
Wow.
and we also have I mean, the Sabbath day is actually, so it's interesting. We move back and forth from being from the roles kind of change. So the Sabbath day, we welcome in the Sabbath queen, and it is basically the marriage day between the Jewish people and God, and it's a day to be um, to just be with God and acknowledge and realize God's existence and essence in the world, go and that he is the creator, and that's why we stop doing our creative activity. And it's interesting also that you say about how brides would take upon the religion of their husband. We also today, at least Orthodox Jews, still have this custom where for example, we have different Jews from different places. So we have European Jews that come from Germany and Poland and Russia and in that area, and basically they spent the better time of the exile in those areas. And there are
Mm-hmm.
Jews like where my family comes from, Morocco and different places in North Africa, and we spent a lot of our exile in Spain, and then in 1492 in the Spanish Inquisition, we moved to different places in North Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have different customs.
Yeah.
So let's say and so we are called Sephardic Jews, and the European Jews are called Ashkenazi Jews. So if an Ashkenazi woman marries a Sephardic man, the Ashkenazi woman would then take on the customs of the Sephardic man and essentially become Sephardic. So we still do have that. I just wanted to fun fact. Okay, so
let me say
there,
this before we move forward. I hope I don't mess up your train of thought because I remembered what I was going to say.
yeah,
Um, when the idea of cultural appropriation was brought to me, I will admit, and if anyone's coming in later, I will admit, I did not respond very well. I totally was like, no, I'm not, like defensive. Um, because, well, I think some of it was cognitive dissonance, to be honest with you. And then just not knowing and not feeling like, but also I am from a culture that is historically and now
oh, yeah.
appropriated all the time. And so then and I know the feeling, and then to believe or to take on the ownership of I'm giving that to someone else was a little overpowering, to say the least. And so it took me to step back for a second, to come around and say, you know what? Okay, let me listen, because what do I want for people when I bring it up? What do I want from them? And my wife was a really big part of this too. She's like, hold on, listen. Don't just think you have an answer. Listen first, then answer. And so it took me a step back, to say, okay, what's going on? And then to realize, okay, yeah, okay, got it. There's something that has to change. So anyone that saw the initial, my initial reaction, um, I mean, don't disregard it. I said it, but know that my views have changed since that original uh, reaction. It was reactionary. I apologize, and I want to know more and do better. So that's where I was. That's what I thought. Go ahead.
And so I want to say something about that because it kind of gave me chills because um, what I think that realization that was like really difficult to
I can't hear you. Can you hear me? Hold
small
on.
voice. Sorry,
Okay, I couldn't hear you at first. Go ahead. You're back.
I was getting a phone call, so it interrupted. So I was saying that I think that realization and that feeling was that still small voice of God that echoes in the Bible constantly saying, "Remember the stranger, for you were a stranger in a strange land." That call to empathy, to see the other's struggle because you know what it feels like. And I've had experiences in my life when I was younger. Um, that that was basically that I had the exact same experience. I think I remember I might have made a racist joke or something like that, and somebody pointed out to me how it is extremely it's unthinkable for Jews to bear any racist ideologies whatsoever
Right.
because we are persecuted along with you, right?
Right.
Centuries we've been persecuted along with you, different reasons, technically or whatever, doesn't matter. And we're not going to do the whole oppression Olympics competition thing.
Right.
The point is that we are both oppressed people, so we both know how it feels.
Mhm.
So when I realized that, I kind of it took a little bit, but that stuck with me that I can't be like that. It doesn't make sense for me to be like that. Sure, it doesn't make sense for anybody to be like that, right?
Right.
But I think it's stronger just because I know how it feels,
Yeah.
and I come from a people who know how it feels. So I get that. Um, let's see if I can remember what I was going to say. Yeah. So um, there's a few points that I wanted to address. One is the idea that the Bible doesn't say anything, um, straightforward, right? Uh, it kind of is calling you to interpret it. It's calling for interpretation because, and we see it very plainly in the holidays. Um, in for the Sabbath, it does say like a couple things, like it says don't light a fire, and but in general it says kol melechet avodah lo ta'asu, which translates to all the melacha, which usually is translated as work, which doesn't really mean anything because you shall not do. Now we have to really understand what melacha means and what work, what that actually means, because I'm allowed to move a bunch of furniture in my house on the Sabbath. I'm allowed to go for, I don't know, a lot of things, but there are specific actions that I'm not allowed to do. And the rabbis derive that from different places where it uses that word, right? And the rabbis tell us that that word is used in the construction of the tabernacle, the mobile temple that the Jews that the Israelites used in the desert. And there are 39 categories of creative work, and the theme is creative work. So work that that you are actually creating something from it, or for example, changing something from one state to another would be creative activity.
Right.
And that the theme is like that because we are kind of acknowledging the creator, right? Throughout the 6 days of the week, we ourselves are engaged in creative work and creative activity throughout the whole day. On one 25-hour period, 25-hour period, I can explain that later, we stop doing our creative activity to acknowledge the creator, and to realize that it is really God that is doing all of this, and that keeps and sustains creation constantly and continuously. So that's just as an example to and like you said, this was developed over time, and the Orthodox Jews do believe that with the giving of the written Torah, the Bible, we were also given principles of how to expound on the Torah, so that God at the same time gave Moses an oral tradition. And an oral tradition was the principles on how to expound on the Torah and how to derive laws from the Torah.
Right.
And so we believe that tradition was passed down from Moses all the way to me. And now, historically speaking, when we get into biblical criticism and secular historical scholars, that gets put into what's the word? That becomes debatable. This line of tradition, but it's still a very firmly held principle in Orthodox Judaism that we have this unbroken chain from Moses up until today of how to expound and how to understand the Torah. And so that's where we get, I think that's no, that's not it. And I was missing something else. I wanted to say something else, and I did forget it. Oh yeah. One other thing, and I think that this is maybe the reason why you saw so many, and I at the same time that I want to defend, I also want to apologize for a lot of, even though I don't
no apology.
I don't represent those Jews, and I don't represent Judaism as a whole. It's still I guess I want you to know that because it's such a sensitive issue, people are going to just erupt and
no apology needed. And I don't by any means feel that you are representing everybody. I know you're not a monolith. Everyone doesn't fall into the same category. I understand where they're coming from. The video remained up for a while, and I really struggled with, should I take the video down? Should I keep the video up? And then we agreed that we were going to meet, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep it up until after we meet, because I needed to I wanted to understand, and I'm like, should I? And I didn't want to take it down and then look like I was just sweeping everything under the rug and hoping it went away.
Right.
And because people do that, they'll make a mistake, and then instead of them taking responsibility and ownership for it, they will sweep it under the rug, never address it again, and pretend like it never happened, and hopefully it'll disappear. That's not how I do things. And so I'm like, if I leave it up, and it was only going to be for I think because we had scheduled it out for maybe 2 days later, but then you got sick, and I'm like, okay, Now what do? Do I leave it up for, until we, till after the holiday? And then you were like, well, let's do it Sunday. And someone else came on and was like, this gives a bad impression of you. I'm like, you know what, I'll take it down. But I don't want anyone to think, and I put it on friends only, because I'm like, I don't want anyone to think that I'm sweeping this under the rug, because I understand it's serious. And I don't mind people, I don't want to upset anyone, but at the same time, I don't mind being talked to about this by several people. Like,
Right.
that doesn't, like, I mean, I don't want to use like hurt, but that I need that. I need your voice and everyone else's voice to chastise me on this in this moment, because I need to understand the severity. So no apology necessary from anyone. I would hope that, you know, understand, we when we talk this thing through, a
Yeah.
mistake was made, and that people can be cordial to me, like I'm not a villain by any means. And from here forward, if somebody wants to be a jerk, then it's like kind of on them, and that's going to be an issue. But for people having an issue with me for what I did, and especially folks that didn't know me, there are people that on there have no clue who I am. I'm just
There's
someone that popped up on
single
their
video, they do one thing and they go off. Right.
Yep. And so, and rightfully so, because if I would have scrolled by a white person doing something that was culturally appropriation against black people, it would have been, it would have been me in the comment section
Right.
with it, and rightfully so. So, by no means am I like, I'm not offended by anyone, so
Okay. I
yeah.
appreciate that. So let's take this can be applied to really the Sabbath and all the holidays, but let's take Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah is very interesting, because I told you in our messages that I believe that the new year, Rosh Hashanah, is not just the new year for the Jews, it's the new year for all of humanity. And I
Word.
want to explain that because there are two, well, there are many different themes and meanings to Rosh Hashanah. It's very deep day, but there are two specific ones that I want to talk about, and one is that Rosh Hashanah is the theme of, this is the anniversary of the creation of man. So some people get misunderstand, and they think that it's the creation of the world. It is the creation of man. Um, so in that way, this day is the new year for all of humanity. It's humanity's birthday, and it's the day that God created man, right? According to the Torah, whatever that means, whether it's a literal person that was breathed into, or whether it's a conceptual idea, more spiritual. I don't want to get into that, but that's what it is. Um, and the rabbis also have an idea that the whole world gets judged on that day. Again, what that means is up for clarification. But so in that sense, this is something that everybody can, in a certain way, celebrate. But what makes it specific to the Jewish people is actually the shofar, because um, if you look at the verses that speak about this day in the Bible, it doesn't it says it's going to be a day of blowing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really say with what instrument. It says Yom Teruah,
Mm-hmm.
which is blowing, which we know is blowing um, from a different commentary that I can get into later. And it doesn't even really say anything about it being a day of judgment. That's something that the rabbis extrapolate.
Mm-hmm.
And the rabbis also extrapolate what it means, this day of blowing. So the Torah seems to be referencing, because, oh, sorry, it says Yom Zichron Trua. It is the day of remembering, the remembering of the blowing.
Okay.
It's almost like a friend coming to you and saying, like, remember that time when that thing happened? Yeah, remember that. And you're supposed to know from, because you already understand, like you experienced it. It
Right.
seems like the Torah is referencing an earlier event, and what the
Mm-hmm.
rabbis show is that the Torah is referencing the revelation at Mount Sinai, because at the revelation at Mount Sinai, we it uses this theme of hearing the and a great the great sound of the shofar, was getting greater and greater. And that sound of the shofar, before God spoke the two commandments to the whole Jewish people, it was the voice of the shofar. God's voice was the voice of the shofar that was turning into words. But at first,
Right.
before they heard anything, they just heard the voice of the shofar, and that voice of the shofar is the voice of revelation, the voice where the children of Israel got to actually, like, God was revealed to them. They didn't just know that God existed; they experienced what that meant, and that was a huge.
Wasn't that during Shavuot though? What we call Pentecost, or is that
So
something?
yeah, it gets confusing because
Mm.
on on Rosh Hashanah we think about this day of the revelation at Sinai, but on Shavuot we focus more on that we received the Torah. I
Gotcha.
don't got the difference being that we focus more on the revelation, that meeting with God, on this day, on Rosh Hashanah, and on Shavuot, it's when we focus on that He gave us the Torah. That
Got
is
it.
what that's kind of the main focuses of the, and that's why there's differences. Really, in Judaism, most of the holidays are going to be referencing either the Exodus from Egypt or the giving of the Torah. Those are really the biggest points and the most important pieces of our narrative as a people is the Exodus from Egypt and the revelation at Sinai. So
Mm-hmm.
at the revelation of Sinai, we went into a covenant with God. So the children of Israel and God. And whenever the Sabbath is written about, or the other holy days, the exact words, at least for the Sabbath, I can remember, is Othi le'olmead beini uven bnei Israel. Yeah, Oti le'olam. Between me and the children of Israel, it is a sign forever, like you said, for generations. But what I've tried to talk to other Christians about is that this is a specific covenant between the Jewish people and God. So the and it goes as far, like the rabbis go as far as to say that you can, and I'll specify Orthodox rabbis will go as far as to say that a non-Jew, a Gentile, you can invite them to different holidays. The only one that you should not invite them to is actually the Passover holiday, because it is like really the quintessential marking of this is when we became the Jewish people, because this is when God took us as a nation, right? Because He intervened in in reality and in the world and in nature in order to take His people out. And so that's what when we
Mm-hmm.
became a people. And so because that is so specific to us, um, we say this is not something that we it's kind of an exclusivist thing. Yeah, I know it comes off as an exclusivist
Mm-hmm.
uh, ideology, I guess. It is and it isn't, because we don't believe that we are better because of our relationship. In fact, actually, some rabbis will show you that it's kind of the opposite, that we were chosen because we needed this, and we needed that kind of
The
what's the word?
discipline, the,
Kind of, yes.
right?
That we are stiff-necked
The
people.
law. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Um, and others would emphasize the idea that we have that the chosenness and the exclusivity is simply because we believe we were charged with the responsibility of of bringing divinity down to earth, and of
Mm-hmm.
being God's emissaries and ambassadors on
Right.
this earth. Um, and the exclusivist nature also comes from the fact that we are extremely small. People, might not realize, because we're on the news so often and because we're so popular, everyone loves us, that we are 0.001% of the population, right?
Wow.
extremely small. I think we're maybe 14 or 15 million Jews in worldwide.
Wow.
Um, so it's reasonable for us to want to kind of preserve that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's where I think that the tension comes in, is that Christians in their um, genuine desire to connect to God, and I see that. I really do see that. I think they might step over something that we hold very dear, and that we don't
Mm-hmm.
say that other people can't have a relationship with God. God forbid. We believe that everybody can have a relationship with God, and that we also believe that the different paths that are out there are legitimate ways of connecting to God. And we even see that in a microcosmic way with the Jewish people. We have a commentary on the splitting of the sea that said that when God split the sea, he didn't split it into just one pathway. He split it into 12 different pathways for all of the 12 tribes to go their own way, and they all ended up at the exact same spot, which is to show that all the tribes had their different way of serving God, and it was all the way that they at the end they were able to serve God. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe that about humanity as a whole. Everybody has their different way, right? And the but the thing is that we have ours, right? We have our way, and that way we hold dear to us as being unique to us and God.
Right.
And I think that's where the tensions come in. Now,
Mm-hmm.
when also specifically with the shofar, I think my friend um, pointed out that it is in the Torah that we both share, right? The interpretation of that Torah is vastly different, but the text itself we do share, and there is a shofar in that practice, right? We do
Mm-hmm.
there are verses that talk about how using the shofar during the holidays, and so that's where I get conflicted, because I think the application of the shofar might be a Pharisaic and therefore rabbinic tradition, which is
Mm-hmm.
why I think is also like also brings a lot of confusion, because Christianity is supposed to kind of be against or opposed to the Pharisaic tradition. That's what I keep hearing. The rhetoric that I keep hearing from many Christians, right, is that that's what Jesus was doing. He was calling out the Pharisees. Now, the Pharisees are the rabbis, and they're the rabbinic traditions. They're the ones who we follow today. So that's where we begin to see the contention here, because
Mm-hmm.
when Christians insult the Pharisees, right, then Jews see it as you're insulting the rabbis, you're insulting
Mm-hmm.
the people who I get my tradition from. And it's not to say that we don't hold our own authorities accountable for things, for corruption and for different things, and we have, right, and we see it in the Talmud, and we see it in the Bible itself. Um, but yeah, I think that's where we start seeing the content.
Tension between people.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you were talking, it's kind of funny. I see, and this is one of the reasons why I like to learn about Jewish history and culture and understanding of the Torah, because our New Testament is written primarily, 99% of it's written by Jewish people. You
Yes.
know, so like Luke, I think, is literally the only person that wrote, and he only wrote 2 books of it, that was a Gentile. And so the perspectives that we get from the New Testament, they're all Jewish perspectives. And so, like what you were just saying about the rabbis believe that uh, that Rosh Hashanah will also be a day of judgment. That we have a scripture in our, I think it's in Philippians, where it talks about the shofar being blown on Rosh Hashanah. Well, we speculate it's Rosh Hashanah, and
Right.
that starts the day of judgment. And so for I won't say most, for a good amount of people that are connecting these dots, it's like, oh, well, that must mean that Jesus returns on Rosh Hashanah, because, and so that's like a Christian thing.
Oh,
that
Okay.
it will be the
Judgment.
judge. Right. And so it's like, okay, it connects. And then when you were saying about um Passover and it being, the exodus from Egypt, and the fact though that Jesus chose Passover to actually institute the new covenant. And
Yeah.
so, and he uses the unleavened bread during this new covenant thing. And it's like, it gets a little weird because it's like, we can only, and I know there's a lot of speculation on, were they doing like a Seder meal when he did it, or was it not a Seder meal but just simply a Passover meal, a meal during Passover? Because he says, where can we eat the Passover? Like, so that's written in the scripture. And so they're going to eat what Jesus calls like a Passover meal. Now, whether that's a Seder or not, that's whatever, to be
Well,
determined.
what that would mean in his time would be he would be eating the sacrifice that is called the Passover lamb,
So the lamb.
right, which was like a fully burnt offering, I think, or no, I don't remember the specifics, so never mind about that. But that's what he would be eating. It would not be the Seder that we see today at all.
Mm-hmm.
The two real similarities would be the unleavened bread, and we don't even have the lamb sacrifice anymore because we
Right.
can't sacrifice. So we just have a remembrance of that by having like a bone or a lamb shank on our table. But so that would be the only similarities, and the fact that it was Passover. But that's what he was doing.
Right.
I believe he was eating the Passover.
The actual lamb.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, we see it tied to, we see it tied to a Jewish holy festival, something that then becomes very sacred for Christian people during a Jewish holy festival time, which is like, it's like, that's like our most important, like where you have your most importance. Kind of
Yeah.
our most important is the fact that we believe that Jesus died, and then also he would have, according to our scriptures, he would have risen on first fruits. So it's like, those are connections that are made from the Old Testament, or the Jewish scripture. um and so it's like, that's where it gets a little weird for people who, at the same time, don't want, for me, I can't talk for everybody. For me, I don't want to be offensive. I certainly don't want to appropriate anything in anybody's culture. But at the same time, I want to be able to express my faith without doing those things, and so how do I do that? And I think that's the question of the day, really. Like, how does a Christian who sees these things as some sort, of connection, without being appropriative, like without being offensive?
Yeah. And I came on here knowing that I don't think we're going to come up with a solution to this,
Right.
because I certainly would not feel right saying, okay, now that you know all of this, now so stop celebrating your holidays and stop celebrating Passover the way you do, and da da da, you because you this is how you practice and this is how you connect to God, right? So, and to your community.
Well, not
So
so much. Let me back up just a little bit and clarify. I think I need to clarify this. I'm not messianic. So, as far as when I say honor, because I asked a couple questions, like, well, how, like, it's wrong for someone to honor, the holy days or whatever. When I say that, I don't mean that, like, I do whatever the rabbis are doing, or
oh yeah,
whatever,
right.
instituting, any of that. So let me just clarify that, like, we don't build a sukkah out during,
Oh, okay.
during,
So,
we
so
don't
that's
put
where,
up.
that's where I'm kind of confused, because I do understand the difference between like messianism and this, and Christians get, I don't know if what term, Christian Hebrew roots move, I don't know exactly what term that is, but Christians trying to find their, going back to their roots.
Yeah.
Um, so I do know the difference, but what I don't really understand, I guess, on a maybe purely on a logical basis, is then why don't you do the booths, or why don't you do? Are you going to fast on Wednesday night, like for Yom Kippur?
For Yom Kippur. Um,
Yeah,
and so with Yom Kippur, it's even a little bit more different. It's a little bit more different. It's a little more different because we believe as Christians that Jesus has already done our sacrifice of atonement. And
right.
so there would be no reason for us to, and not that you all sacrifice on Yom Kippur, but if the temple were still in operation and you could
It would.
sacrifice, it would be the day of atonement by sacrificing an animal. So we believe that, since that's our, belief system, there's no need for fasting or Yom Kippur. So it's been
Uh-huh.
fulfilled.
Okay. So, but then in that same vein, what how would you determine what has been fulfilled and what hasn't? Because the day of Rosh Hashanah, when God says, "Do these things for me," uh, is in effect the same thing He's saying when He says, "Do these things for me" on Yom Kippur, right? I mean,
Mm.
yes, they are different in a sense that the Yom Kippur offers atonement, and Rosh Hashanah and the other days don't, but there's still laws from God that, from what I understand, Jesus would have fulfilled that for Christians.
Well, Christians believe those that prescribe to this type of, connection believe that there are three, I think, that he fulfilled while his earthly ministry back, at the beginning of the, you know, AD or whatever, the beginning of the century or whatever it's called. And then there are three that he has not yet, but will fulfill on his return.
Okay.
And so, you know, Passover is one that we consider fulfilled. Um, Personally, I consider Sukkot fulfilled in the sense that I believe that he was born during that time, to be honest with you. And first fruits, or I'll say not Pentecost, Shavuot, as fulfilled, but the others that are yet to be fulfilled, or Yom Kippur is fulfilled. I don't know how many are fulfilled, but there
Okay.
are some that are, some that aren't.
Okay. So it's kind of like not sinking when I hear like fulfilled and not fulfilled when it comes to those holidays, because we see them so differently. Like the
Mm-hmm.
days of Sukkot is the day that we commemorate two things. The Jews themselves. That I keep saying Jews because that's how I was, but I should more accurately say the Israelites in the desert, where they set up booths
Mm-hmm.
while wandering in the desert. And
Right.
we also commemorate the Ananeha Kavod, the clouds of glory that were surrounding the Israelites throughout their sojourn in the desert, and that the rabbis comment on these clouds of glory, that they kept the Israelites not just from the dangers of the desert, but also air conditioned, and their clothes never wore out, and they were in a pretty great spot with these clouds of glory, and that is
Right.
what we commemorate. Um, so so that can't be fulfilled, or not, that's fulfilled when we commemorate it, like it,
Right.
like I'm just like, from that point of view, a fulfillment of that command to do these things would not make sense, because it's still something that we are, like you said, for generations we are commanded to do. That's also
Mm.
another issue with this, is that like a lot of these things He says forever, for generations.
Right.
So how do we understand Jesus being able to fulfill these things, when in the Torah it says that these things are gonna
Right.
continue
Forever.
generations, right?
Because I think, and the way I understand it is, for instance, when, let's say, Passover, Jesus instituting the new covenant for me during that time, doesn't overshadow or wipe away the miracle that happened in Egypt
Mhm.
for the children of Israel. It's still there. It still happened. It's still glorified. It's still commemorated. It's just something else added to it that's important,
Right.
you know, for us. So it's not like we're like, forget what he did in Egypt, this is what he did now. It's like, no, 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 no. Let's remember what he did in Egypt as a better understanding for us, a better understanding of what took place, in the New Testament. And so it's not so much like, I guess when I'm using these terminologies, fulfilled, for instance, they've been passed down to me. And the reason it's been passed down is because fulfilled is what Jesus said. It's what he's quoted as to have said. I've come not to abolish the scripture, but rather to fulfill them. And so perhaps fulfill is the best word to use, because that makes it seem like, oh, well,
They're done.
who cares what happened? Yeah, it obliterates everything. And I can see now how that's probably pretty offensive, especially since it's like, wait, we're commemorating something still that's still very important. And I agree, completely. Like I said, I serve God, and what he did, we preach on it all the time. When he parted the sea, that's something that we're not going to erase that. Um, but at the same time, there's something else that happened on that day as well, that for me and my tradition, that we want to commemorate alongside, not alongside, because it's connected. We
Because
feel
it's
it's connected.
right. Yeah, it's actually, I cannot give it justice, this idea, because I heard it once from a really great creator on here. His name is Joshua Maria Garcia, and he spoke about the connection of the Passover and why Jesus is considered the Passover lamb. And the whole connection with the blood being a sign of protection, because in that story, the blood of the sacrifice on the hyssop was there, and on the doorpost was there to be a sign of protection for God to pass over. And there's a lot of connections there, which I found like really interesting. I never it opened my eyes to how Christians see the connections that a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
Jews kind of really dismiss uh, very flagrantly, if that's the word, because they just, because all they hear is Judaism is irrelevant, and this is what we're doing now, because
Right.
on the surface of things, that is what is being said by many Christians, is that we don't follow, and it's a way also, sometimes it's a tactic for some progressive Christians to help out the non-progressive Christians, to show them like, we don't follow, like, do you eat shrimp, like, that
Mm-hmm.
sort of idea, which can be inconsistent here.
Mm-hmm.
um, and also it just sends that message that like Judaism is irrelevant. Those laws, those really silly laws, like not eating shrimp and mixing wool and linen, all of those silly ideas. We don't keep those now. Well, yeah, we do. We have
Some people do, right?
billion people that keep these laws, and we don't see them as stupid, and we see them very differently than many people do. Um, and I'm trying to think of like, how can we kind of have our cake and eat it too, both of us, and um, because I do see that there is legitimacy to your at least to a certain degree, to your parts of to claims of Torah, and
Mm-hmm.
of the different practices. And I'm trying to figure out a way how you can keep that, have that, and it be seen as not
Yeah.
um, not
And
supersessionist.
not taking, and I think as I was reading some of the comments, and that's another reason I kind of left the video up a little bit, is because some people were actually teaching me, like I was learning from some of the people that were like, because people were questioning, like, why is she, how is she appropriating, like, that's like some of the question
Yeah.
that people ask, and then some people would actually respond with an answer, well, this is what she's done. And I was taking that in. um and someone actually just said it just now. Cryptic Sunflower says Jesus' style of of, and pronounce Judaism for me properly, please. Is that how you say,
Judaism.
how do you say
The way
Judaism?
you said,
Somebody said
there are
I
people who don't like when non-Jews say Judaism, and
got you.
I don't get a problem with it, but whatever, it's
So
fine.
Judaism
Yeah.
was vastly different than modern day Judaism.
Yes.
Um, and so that never, for me at that time last week, was never like a it. I knew it, but I didn't know it. And so when people started saying it, I'm like, they're right. Some of the things that we see, like for instance, if I look at you and I say, oh, he's doing exactly what Jesus would have done,
Nope.
is not going to be
Right.
accurate
Right.
for
Yeah.
multiple reasons. 2,000 years ago, that's number one. But then two, there's been a lot of development that's happened with everybody's religions over the course of this 2,000 years. And so to say, I'm going to do what modern day Jews do today,
Yeah.
you're certainly going to appropriate something
Yeah.
that Jesus,
That is the biggest problem. Yeah. I don't
yeah,
know if
like,
you saw, I had a video of somebody made a ridiculous comment. We have a song that was developed by a 15th century Kabbalist in Israel, and we sing it every Shabbat. It's called Lecha Dodi, and it's bringing the ministering angels that accompany us on the Sabbath day, that come to us to bless us. It is a greeting to them, basically. And
hmm.
somebody commented on my singing that, oh, how lovely, Jesus did that. And I'm like, no, he did not, because he might have kept the Sabbath, but he did not. If Jesus came today to my house, he would not recognize the Judaism in any way.
Right.
He would not the Judaism. I would be like, yeah, we're here, we're gonna celebrate Shabbat. Like, this is Shabbat. Not, you would not get it.
Right.
That's a very big point that people just take for granted, right? And there are even Jews that would take that for granted. It's just not something that you think about, really. Jesus was a Jew. Jesus was a Jew. You keep hearing that.
Yeah.
Think, okay, so what's Jewish? That's what my conception of Judaism is. So Jesus was a Jew, and people don't
To
take in
connect it that way.
history into
Hmm.
account. Yeah. So
Yeah. So with that, it's like, okay, so we can't, like, we cannot take on as Christians the things from modern day Jewish people and take them as our own with under the guise of Jesus was Jewish. That's
yeah,
it doesn't
yeah,
matter
exactly.
that Jesus is Jewish when it comes, especially when it comes to the things that modern people are doing that Jesus never would have even he would have never done. So
Right.
yeah.
Like, how people who want people who are a lot more, this is more messianic ideology. I say, like, you want to follow these laws, you want to follow the Torah, and you even follow some of the rabbis. I would consider looking into conversion. Don't necessarily call this muffin a cupcake. It's not. It's a different story. Um, but here is a different story, because you're not claiming that this is, you know uh, that what you are keeping is Judaism, right?
No, no,
And
not.
it's not. um Again, I had a
What
point.
would you do though? And this is a question that, as I was thinking, what if someone was culturally and raised Jewish and eventually decided to become Christian, or I won't even call them Christian yet, decided that they believed that Jesus in the Bible was the Messiah or is the Messiah, and then says, well, I believe that. What happens with them? What
Yeah,
happens?
that's been a point of confusion when Jews talk about how Messianic Judaism is a misnomer, and Messianic Jews aren't Jews, because you can't believe in Jesus and be Jewish. And um, so so that's a great uh, example of a person who was born ethnically Jewish to two Jewish parents, um, and decides to believe in Jesus as the Messiah. And I've said it before. This person is still Jewish, and they will always be Jewish in and they will always be Jewish on a cultural level, on an ethnic level, and even from a Kabbalistic perspective, on a soul spiritual level, they are still Jewish. That's not going to change. Um, have they effectively taken themselves out of uh, Judaism, not just in thought or belief, but also in community? Yes, because it is one of the, sadly, we're all, I mean, for the good and the bad, we're all extremely tribal people,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
all of us, right? And that can be to our benefit, and that can be to our detriment. But what separates us and what makes us, sometimes what makes a group strong is what separates them from the other. It's what
Mm-hmm.
they don't do that's different, right?
Right.
And this is one of those things. Jesus is really one of those things. That's where originally this whole split happened, right? Was that the early Christians were mainly Hellenized Jews, and that were following Jesus, and were diverging from the Pharisaic tradition. And um, I believe it was actually Paul who made it, who really distinguished Christianity from Judaism by making the Sabbath day on Sunday. Was one of the things that really kind of determined this is not Judaism.
Right.
Uh,
The Lord's Day, because
right.
supposedly would have risen on Sunday, so that was why they
Oh,
changed it,
that's
or
why.
all did it. But
Uh,
yeah, they made it the Lord's Day instead of having to honor the Sabbath. You honor
yeah.
Sunday as the day.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, but for whatever reason, it kind of, that was really the one of the deciding factors then, that this is really separate. Um, and I forget my point.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I had a thing and I forgot what were you saying before this? You were asking what would I do? Yeah, what is a person who is not is
Yeah.
Jewish but believes in Jesus? Yeah. So again, this is one of the things that kind of makes us separate, is that we don't believe in Jesus, regardless of what you believe within Judaism, and there are a lot. Um, we all believe that we all agree that Jesus is not the Messiah and is not
Right.
God. We
And you're
have
awaiting, or are you
Yeah.
awaiting them, or
So the Orthodox tradition is that we are awaiting a Messiah, and yeah, that we don't know who it's going to be or when this Messiah is going to come, um, but that when the Messiah does come, then he will bring the Jewish people together, unify the Jewish people, and bring them back to the land of Israel, and establish peace in the world. And that's kind of like, that's one of the reasons that Jews don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah, because these prophecies, which were the kind of prescription for the Messiah that the tradition set up, were not fulfilled.
gotcha.
Um, so so yes, this person is still Jewish by, in as it relates to his ethnicity, his culture, and his, well, culture maybe not, depending on where he goes after, but
Mm-hmm.
and even on a spiritual level, this person is still Jewish, but they are not part of the Jewish community anymore. They can't consider what they do and what they believe Judaism, because it's not, because
Mm-hmm.
it's a very big point of contention. It's not just like saying, I'm trying to think um, of like a small point that doesn't really matter within Judaism. I can't think of one right now. It's probably too specific, but this is a big one, right?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to Jesus being God. That
Right.
is a for sure a no
No, no.
because
Right.
because um, we do have we have something that was established, and this is something that mainly Orthodox Jews, again, I'm speaking from the Orthodox perspective because that's where mainly I know. We have something called the 13 Principles of Faith that were set up by Maimonides, and a few of them talking about God and how God is not is incorporeal, right? There's no body or physicality to God. So that's one of the big like no-nos, right? And
Right.
but in the writings of the Rambam, he says that these are the people who don't believe this are considered heretics in Judaism. Now they're still Jews, but they're heretics.
Mm-hmm.
So this person effectively would be coined a heretic by traditional Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha. And I guess, and that's why Jesus was coined a heretic. I mean, it's like he.
That to me, I don't know yet, because from what I've heard from progressive Christians of what Jesus's message was, it does not seem to be against Jewish ideology or values, really in any way. He,
Mm-hmm.
uh, be the person that takes care of the marginalized and the oppressed. Um, to love your neighbor is the greatest, right? Is one of the greatest commandments. That is a great principle in Judaism as well. He actually seen we have a famous quote. Rabbi Akiva says that to love your neighbor as yourself is the greatest principle in the Torah. We also believe it is the greatest way to actually have a relationship with God, because each one of us is a reflection, is in the image of God, and is therefore a piece of the divine is within each and every one of us. So when I'm properly relating to you, I'm relating to the divine,
Right.
and so that is a way to connect to God is through that, and that's why we see it as the greatest commandment. So in that sense, Jesus wasn't really veering off from what, at least what we believe today. Maybe it might have looked different in a sense that maybe the Jews, the Jews at that time might have had different priorities. Like
Mm-hmm.
Jews in different communities today around the world have different priorities
Right.
when it comes to what they view as important. Even though in all of our writings it says that loving your neighbor as yourself is really the one of the things that you really should prioritize over others,
Right.
or it's the way that you should frame everything else. I think that's a better way of looking at it.
Right.
uh, but again, didn't really veer off. So God, I keep losing my point.
We were talking about like Jesus being a heretic.
Right.
From my
So in that
so,
sense, a heretic. In that sense, how is Jesus
right.
a heretic?
From my
Like,
understanding, it was that Rome was the overriding authority during that time, and that there were some connections that were being made by the Pharisees and more so the Sadducees, I think, according to what we're taught, that they weren't being very nice to the Jewish people. They were more so almost taking advantage of them, connecting with more with Rome to
the sad.
do mm-hmm,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
connecting more with Rome and kind of underhanding the the community. And so they took a dislike to it. Wasn't so much like his message of love, it was more so the way he was like, y'all are dead wrong with the way you're treating people, like that sort of, and they were kind of like the powerful people,
Right.
from what we are taught. These
Yeah.
guys were the decision makers, the powerful guys, the ones that were supposed to be most versed in the law and the scriptures, but yet were the ones that kind of let power go to their heads, that we even see in Christian churches today. And I'm sure in places other, but I only know from a Christian perspective
Yeah.
that power goes to people's heads and they become corrupt sometimes, more times often than not. And so that's kind of what we're taught, kind of what happened. And Jesus was kind of a person that was like not going to happen, and he stood up to it, and they got pretty mad at him for it. So
yeah, it's that time is fascinating, and I think if anybody should, any Christian and Jew should really take a close look at that time, at that point in history, because it's fascinating what was happening there. And yes, we don't hide from the fact that there was a lot of corruption in the authorities at that time, that were, high priests were being bribed. And it even said that there's this line in the Talmud that talks about how in the times of the Second Temple, I believe, on Yom Kippur, the only day that the high priest was allowed into the Holy of Holies, that they would tie a rope around his ankle, because because the priest needed to be, on
pure.
on yeah, pure and on the right level to be able to go in there and not die. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so they would tie a rope around his ankle, because so many of them were corrupt, buying their way into the seat of power, because it was a seat of power, not just religiously, but also the high priest was in charge of taxing the people and bringing it to the Romans, right?
Wow.
And so they were in a position of great power. And they were dying off because of this. They were entering into that dying, and they would have to bring them back in. We know that there was corruption. Um, so again, in that sense, purely in that sense, I don't see Jesus as being a heretic. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
to those people, right, to the authority at that time.
Right.
But in the sense that there are Christians today who will see Jesus as adding or taking away from the law, which is something that the Torah says you should not do, or or Christians that view Jesus as prophesying things that were not, or were against what the Torah says, which would make him
Mm-hmm.
a false prophet.
Right.
Uh, all these things that Jesus's followers tag onto Jesus. That I don't know if necessarily this is what Jesus wanted or preached. I personally don't even believe that he set out to create a new religion. I
Me
don't
either.
know if it's a controversial take, but I don't think that's that. Yeah, I don't think that that's what Jesus set out to do. From
I
everything that
say
I
all the time.
yeah,
He didn't have to make another religion.
and I would even, I don't know what is your view on Jesus exactly, because that also
Yeah,
varies widely,
it
right?
does. I believe that Jesus is the Son of God. I believe in the Holy Trinity. So
Okay.
Father, Son, Holy Ghost, but I believe that they are one. So yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I have a pretty orthodox Christian view of Jesus,
Hmm.
and I
Yeah.
know that.
Sorry, say that again.
I say I know that varies. There, especially
Yeah.
within some of the progressive circles that um, think a little differently. But
And the idea of the Trinity is one that I've kind of been trying to wrap my head around. I made a kind of a teasing video. It was a question that was not so much of a question. I kind of already had my own take on it, and I asked, what is the difference between the Kabbalistic view of God, the Trinity, and Hinduism? Because, and I know that there are major differences. My point was to show that in all three we see God as encompassing more than that. There is a oneness, but there's also a multiplicity. Meaning, in Hinduism, for example, they have the concept of, and I'm not going to do it justice. There are plenty of people who know a lot more about Hinduism than I do. But they have a concept called Brahman, which is the source of everything. And from that source emanates all the gods. And all the gods are channels of energy of Brahman. And they were, throughout the history of Hinduism, were given names and personalities, and become and anthropomorphized images. Just sorry, that
oh
was
no,
my
you're
telling me, that was my phone telling me that I need to charge it. So just 1 second. So what was I saying? Yeah, the
You were talking about Brahman,
so that's
and
how, yeah, so that's how the Hindus see the divinity, and how that works, right? It's one source, and emanating from that one source is all these different gods, and they relate to those gods because that's how they believe that Brahman interacts with reality. And
mm-hmm,
in Kabbalistic thought, we have the Ein Sof, which translates to the endless one. Um, yeah, Ein Sof actually just literally just means without end,
mm-hmm,
and that is the source, that is God, but in its ultimate essence that we can never grasp. And then
right,
there is the light of the Ein Sof that emanates down, and is channeled through 10 sephirot, 10 emanations of the divine. And so these 10 emanations are channels of this energy that create create this existence and interact with us, with humanity. Now, am I wrong in saying that the Trinity has a somewhat similar um, understanding,
I
or
don't
am I
think
completely
it's
off?
wrong. Only we believe that they're all equal, and but it sounds like I don't know kind of where the difference. It's similar,
Well,
definitely.
the difference is that the gradation, I guess, of the light might be lesser. Like we also believe that the light, that God's energy is kind of like sifted through different worlds, different spiritual worlds, and that we are in the lowest level
Right.
where physicality can actually manifest, where the
Mm-hmm.
material can actually manifest, has room, because on the higher levels there's really too much God. I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
best way to say it, for for other things to exist, for the material to exist. So we live on that level. It's all God, but it's different um,
Levels.
levels in a sense. So I guess maybe in that sense, it's a different idea, because the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost are all God, right?
Right. Which is funny though that you use the word light, because we consider Jesus to be the light. Like that's what we like. John writes and he says that he was the light and the darkness has not overcome it. And so, and he also describes him as the word. And so when we look in like Genesis, when God said let there be light, it's not that he's creating Jesus, but it was the spoken word of which was Jesus. It's so confusing.
No. Yeah, yeah. It goes into John 1, right?
Yeah, that spoken word, like, so Jesus, the Holy Spirit, God, they're one. And then based on what needs to happen, based on, I guess, what needs to take place. So for instance, God needed to manifest, incarnate. And so we see it through, and we believe that the incarnate God is also seen in the angel of the Lord in the Hebrew text. So
Right. I've
when,
heard this. Yes.
yeah, so like for instance, jo- when Jacob wrestles with God, that it was a physical wrestling of an incarnate God, which we consider to be pre we consider that to be Jesus, but just before he was incarnated, if that makes sense.
I mean, it makes a little bit more sense to me, just because I am more mystically inclined.
Right.
um, and this concept, so depending on what the, let's call it, entity right now is doing, that is when we're going to say this is the work of the Holy Spirit, this is the work of Jesus, and this is God. So we also have a similar concept in that, when it comes to the different names of God that are used in the Torah. So, for example, up until Genesis 2, I believe, the name Elohim is used to refer to God.
Mm-hmm.
In the Kabbalistic school of thought, Elohim is seen as the attribute of din, which is justice, strict justice. Um, and so strict justice can sometimes be kind of scary and seen as maybe cruel or whatever. Many times in the Torah, when you see things that happen that have to do with destruction or the like, you will see the name Elohim being used,
Mm.
because it is referring to the many the multiple powers that God uses that are in use in this existence, which some of the powers that are here are not very nice, right? Mother
Mm-hmm.
Nature is can be a bitch sometimes. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh, and ruthless. That
Mm-hmm.
is the Elohim aspect. And when we see Yud, the Tetragrammaton, the Yud, the Hey, the Yahweh, as in English,
Mm-hmm.
um, that is more referring to God's attribute of mercy. That is when God is interacting with humanity and with existence with this attribute, it uses that name. So we
Right.
don't believe that there is Elohim and there is Yahweh and there is whatever. We believe that it's all the same power that uses different energies, I guess, to interact with humanity at different points and to interact with its creation as a whole.
Right.
In that sense, that kind of sounds the same, except I think that some Christians would kind of fight me on that. No, they're separate but the same. Like they are separate persons, but what do they say? Three
Yeah.
different persons, but the same thing.
Personality. Yeah. Personalities, but same thing. The analogy I always use is water, H2O. Steam, solid, or what? Steam, ice, and water. It's
Yeah,
all H2O, but it's different functions for different things. So depending on what's needed. So, but
I
all
mean,
H2O.
unless I'm missing something, it's not really a heretical concept in Judaism, and I'm for sure going to be like flagged by one of my
Right.
comments. I
I
I
mean,
don't see it.
honestly, God is too big to put in a box, you know, personally. And so
100%.
yeah, I'm totally like open to like everything you were saying is like, I it's like it sounds, you know, like God is too big. Like, and who are we to say that it's God, you know, like,
Yeah, I think we find comfort. Humans find comfort in putting God in a box
yeah,
because
trying to
then,
to our
yeah,
understanding.
exactly. And yeah, it's a very human thing, and I think, and we are very. It's very easy for us to fall prey to that.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, specifically in my journey, I know more about what God is not than what God is. Um, because I mean, just on my own personal level, it's been difficult to figure out what has been a godly experience in my life, if that makes sense. When I was connecting, and maybe when I wasn't, maybe when it was just my emotions or just my ego. Um, so it's useful to look at God in the negative, kind of, and like what God is not, to
Yeah.
maybe kind of come to. So right now, while I can tell you the Orthodox point of view and the Kabbalistic thought, my own personal thing is kind of up in the air at this at this point in time.
Makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
makes. So let me ask this, and I know we're starting to probably wind down a little bit. You know, as when it was brought to me that the shofar is some people were saying, well, the shofar is strictly ours.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm like, but the horn, now perhaps I don't know what shofar means in English. Is there a translation? Is it trump? Is it just trumpet, or is it like literally just it's
Um,
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. I'm gonna have to ask someone about that. I know that Jews know shofar to be a horn, and we know it specifically to be a ram's horn because that is our tradition. Even though we do we do have a tradition of some people being able to use other animals' horns, but
Mm-hmm.
we also have a category of animals that we are not allowed to use the horns. That the horn
Right.
would not be kosher. So it's definitely a horn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is maybe was it considered, could we just say that it was a trumpet? I don't know. What I know for sure is that our tradition, whenever it says shofar, we know it's the ram's horn. We know that
Got
it's not necessarily. Yeah, hold on, because I think in Psalms, it says something like bachatzotzot de kol shofar, meaning with sounds of trumpet, with trumpets and the sound of the shofar. I think a chatzatzra is a trumpet. I think
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. Again, that's something that I'm gonna have to look up later. But yeah,
And so my question was, you know, is it the word shofar, and is it the fact that this horn would be used for a religious purpose, specifically uh, the Rosh Hashanah purpose? Because the horn itself, especially the kudu horn I was holding, has been utilized and is utilized in many African traditions that are not have nothing to do. Some of them spiritual, but have nothing to do with uh, the Jewish religion at all. And so they use it for blowing, for healing purposes, for wartime, for yeah. And so this is a horn that it's a and history teaches that using animal horns as trumpets, we'll say, is
it's
that's what it
widely
did.
used.
Yeah, because there was no brass,
Right.
so using even a cow's horn, but of course a cow's horn couldn't be utilized for a shofar, but a kudu horn or even a ram's horn, anything that's hollow by itself by removing the
Yes.
cartilage, could be turned into a horn. And so the question I had was, what institutes a shofar? Because a kudu horn, without the religious implications, is just a kudu horn. And if not called a shofar, but just simply called a kudu horn, then it's just a kudu horn. And it's used
It's
in different
great.
situations.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and one that I didn't even really think about. I now remember that there in Hinduism there's also a blowing of a conch shell that's,
Mm-hmm.
has a similar spiritual significance, or has spiritual significance. I don't know this, if there are similarities.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's interesting that you mentioned that there are different cultures out there and different spiritual practices that use a horn, an animal's horn. And I'm sure if let's say if it was a different story and you were of a different, certain tribe that used this horn and you were using it on Jews, would be doing the same thing to your comment section, not so legitimately.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's I guess I think on the surface, Jews and Christians alike who are not so well informed about their own religions and the history of their religions will see, from the Jewish perspective, they will see a Christian holding a Jewish article, a Jewish religious article, and claim it to be a part of their religion, and they will get infuriated because to them it's this is a Jewish thing. Period. It's not something that Christians can have any hold on. Um, from the Christian perspective, Christians who don't know that much about the religion, I think they would say, um, when they discover the horn and say, "Oh wow, this is an amazing physical object that I can use to get closer to Jesus because this is what Jesus was doing," and completely dismiss or ignore or not even realize that this is a Jewish artifact.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And I think I began with giving the distinction of it being uniquely, or how it's uniquely Jewish. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's how it's used. Um, and I said that it related to the revelation at Sinai, right? That special covenant between the Jewish people and God. So when we blow the shofar, that is the day that we are supposed to remember. We are supposed to remember that special relationship that we have with God. And so
Mm-hmm.
in that way, the shofar is very unique to Judaism. Um, I guess if you were to get a what do you call it? Because I call it a Yemenite shofar. I didn't. Where does it come from? The one that
It's
you have?
the animal is a kudu. It's
A kudu.
an
Okay,
African. Yeah, it's like an African antelope.
interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess if somebody were to take that and use it as a musical instrument, purely as just a musical instrument, I don't I couldn't see a problem with that, because it has been used as just a musical. I think it has to do with the context and with one's own context and understanding. And I'll give you an example that might relate. I think it relates in my head. Let's see if it works. Um, there is a group of Jews, ultra Orthodox Hasidim. They live in well, they live all around, but like in New York and Williamsburg, you'll see their community. They are extremely sheltered from the modern world. They don't watch movies. They don't listen to TV. They don't watch the radio or listen to any secular music. They're not exposed in any way to the modern world. So my rabbi knows a family of ultra Orthodox Hasidim who, for Sukkot, it's customary for Jews to decorate their sukkah with all sorts of paper crafts and things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
this Hasidic family went to the store and found um, a big rabbi with a red suit and a white beard, and and beautiful little green and red lights, and a round thing of trees and little things, and they hung it up in their sukkah, and they just thought it was a lovely, colorful decoration. They had
Right.
no association with Christmas, Santa Claus, any of this, right?
Right.
So to them, that's all it was. It was just nice decorations. But for me, just sorry, one second. Someone is asking me something in the comments, and I want to answer. Can you please sing Vidui prayer? I might be doing that. Errol Warrior. I'll have to see what my energy level is to make those videos, but I'll do my best. So what was I saying?
You were talking
Right,
about the Santa Claus.
right. So I think the association that you have matters a lot. I think that um, in the case of a Christian who sees the shofar as purely something to get connected to Jesus with and Christianity, I think they need some education. I think they need to realize what they're actually holding. If it's a and I think it would still be okay for a Christian to view that article as something that connects them to their roots, because in a certain sense, yes, Jesus was a Jew. The shofar is not something that is only for modern day Jews. It stems back to Jesus's time. We did blow the shofar. I think the difference and the thing that I would uh, dissuade people from doing is blowing the shofar or using it on Rosh Hashanah,
Mm-hmm.
because that practice is
Strictly.
specifically and uniquely Jewish, and that was something that was developed over time, and also the way that you blow it. Right, we have a specific
Mm-hmm.
way of blowing it. One long, then three short, and then nine
Mm-hmm.
short, and then another long one. That whole thing and what
That's
we're supposed to think about, that's just strictly Jewish. So I
right.
think that's where I would make
Draw the
that
line.
distinction. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And if I could, just to give you just a little background, right? So I first learned about a shofar, and I'll say, I don't think I even knew it was a shofar. I think I learned the trumpet when, or I don't know what it was called, like in the scriptures. I
Yeah,
guess I learned it as a trumpet,
I think
is
so.
when Gideon was fighting the battle, and he handed each one of the people that was fighting with him, after God had done the falling away of those that were scared and those that didn't want to lap the water, and there were only a few of them left. He gave them a clay pot, a shofar or a horn, and a
Yeah.
light, and they won the battle with just those three elements. And so for me, that was like the eye-opening moment where I'm like, wow, like that story, like it resonates with me, because what's really big in my Christian tradition is our praise. We believe in praising through the enemy's attacks on our lives. And so we'll dance and we'll shout and we'll clap and we'll stomp and we'll make a lot of noise. And we believe, and that's part of our African tradition, honestly, because we believe that that's part of warding away, winning the battle. Praising wins the battle.
Oh wow. Yeah.
And we connect it to that story of Gideon. Although they weren't necessarily praising, they shouted, they blew the horn.
Is this the Battle of Jericho that you're talking about?
This is Gideon, when
Gideon and
it was in Judges. Gideon is he's kind of cowardice. He's down in, like, he's threshing wheat down in like away from everybody, and he's scared. And the angel of the Lord comes to him and he's like, "Get up. You're going to lead an army. You're going to defeat them." And he empowers them to go out to battle. And Gideon gets this army and he goes out and and defeats them with literally nothing, like no swords, like a
right.
light, a horn, and shouting voices, and a piece of clay, a clay pot, and they break the pots and they blow the horns and they scream, and the enemy thinks that they're being attacked by a large army, and they kill themselves. They turn on one another. And it's like, and for us in the Christian tradition, at least in my tradition, like, that's how you defeat the enemy. That's how that's how you fight your battles.
Right.
So a lot of people that are coming from like a Pentecostal type background or a charismatic will use a kudu horn. And I'm going to refrain from calling it, a shofar from here out, because I understand now that that's a very sacred term. But we'll utilize the kudu horn and blow it, to as a sign of victory, in their praise. So, and I don't
So
know how.
it's interesting. It's just a very different. Even though we have the same story, right? I mean, I was thinking about the walls come tumbling down after the
Jericho.
seven blasts
Yeah.
of the trumpet, right? Also another similar idea of the battle cry and it being a sign of victory. That's, interestingly enough, that's actually how we view, or one of the ways that we view the four species that we're supposed to take on Sukkot. The, I don't know if you're familiar with the citron and the palm
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
palm
The thing
frond.
that looks like lemon and the,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. We see that, we take that as a sign of victory. I'm not going to explain that because that's way too long to explain. But it's just interesting that we take the same article, we take the same events, and we draw different conclusions from them. And I don't know if I see a problem with it. I I don't. I think it's if this is something that is a way for you to connect to God, and it doesn't harm anybody and it doesn't harm yourself, then go for it. I really, that's kind of been my whole um credo, my whole stance throughout this whole thing, is that when speaking with Christians and um messianics and all of that, I never care for them to convert for them to think that I know and that I have the right way and that I have the truth. No, it's simply um, to show that they need to be sensitive, and I always emphasize that if this is something that brings you closer to God and makes you a better person, makes you a better father, a better mother, a better friend, you know, a better person in society, then I'm not going to fight you on it. And there's no reason for me to try to convince you of something different.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's my stance. So again, here I like, again, this is not me giving a an allowance for Christians to do
Right.
whatever, because I'm no authority, absolutely
Right.
no authority on any
Yeah, you
Judaism
can't speak
or
for
anything.
everybody. I get it.
Right. But from my understanding, from my sensibilities, from my from my understanding, I don't see a problem with Christians using the horn to remember and to connect to those events, and uh, and use it as a way to connect to God in that way.
Right.
I see it
Not
as
so far being blown on Rosh Hashanah
on
for
Rosh
a
Hashanah, yeah, or on
makes
Yom
sense.
Kippur, because we're also
Right.
blowing it on Yom Kippur.
Right.
Yeah.
Or any of the Jewish holy days where, yeah, it's sacred. So totally get it. Yeah.
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 I'm really happy that we were able to have this discussion, and
Me
I
too.
know I learned a lot, and I hope everybody that was listening here on my page also learned and enjoyed.
Likewise, mine. Yeah. I'm
Amazing.
considering, I'm going to take down, now that we've had our discussion, I'm going to take down my video completely. I didn't want you to even, like, I considered taking it down before, but I didn't want you to be like, what did she say again? And try to go and find it, and it was gone. So I'm going to take it down and not have it. But I'm considering the message was very important in it, though. Redoing it, but not to be offensive to anyone. And so if maybe I can run it by you beforehand.
Oh, I would love that. I would
If
love that.
like,
Please.
yeah, and not to, and hello everybody. I haven't been ignoring you guys. So if anyone has been talking to me, I'm so sorry if I
Yeah, same here.
yeah,
Sorry.
but I wanted to give my full attention as best I could to the conversation at hand. And I want to apologize for anyone that's on. I'm also going to do a video probably tomorrow, so don't hold me to it tonight. I don't want nobody to get mad, be like, she said she was gonna do a video and didn't. But I want to apologize, and I want for anyone that was offended by me, whether they be on your page or on mine, to apologize again with a sincere heart, to say that I first of all, I wouldn't have put that video up there if I knew it was offensive to begin with, but at the same time, I'm glad I did, because I learned something. I've learned, and I'm going to make sure that that as best I can, that I do better. And I
I
appreciate
also
it.
don't want people to forget, I'm sorry for cutting you
Oh
off,
no, no.
that the whole message of that video, which I loved, and which was about showing ignorant Christians that these practices are not demonic, that just because they don't understand something doesn't mean
Right,
that it's all of a sudden something from the devil. And it's
right.
something that I experienced on my video when I was blowing the shofar in one of my videos. I got a few comments saying, like, this is demonic, it looks like you're calling in the demons or something like that, and it comes from
Mhm.
the people who you were speaking to. So that I really appreciate.
Our image of the devil has come from the image of the horn god in other people's religions. And
Yes.
so there's no description of what the devil is supposed to look like, right? And so, but we've made it into the image of someone else's god,
Yeah.
which has horns. And so the purpose of the whole video was anything with horns is like this, it's demonic, and the whole purpose was like, this is something from like, like Jewish tradition. Like, what
Judaism,
are you
right? Like
talking
your
about?
roots, like, yeah.
Like, yeah, like, what are you saying? That's not demonic, so that was like the purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And a lot
humans
of
fear.
times it's hard to convey that in like 60-second
Yeah,
TikToks, right? It's difficult to convey all the nuance that is encapsulated in the things that you're mentioning, right?
yeah, yeah. And I
Yeah.
thought it was the perfect time. And I apologize, but I'm like, oh, Rosh Hashanah is coming up. They're going to be
I
using the horns. So
I I want to stress and reiterate that from my end, regardless, like even though I showed emotion in that video, in that response to you, it was not, I did not take offense, and I did not see it as you doing something on purpose to erase Judaism, and it was a way for me to highlight a problem, a big problem in the community, right? and and it's because I want to do this kind of dialogue where we are able to understand each other, see our similarities, and come together. That's why I do my best to not really take offense, unless you're a blatant anti-Semite. Then that's a different
we're right.
story, which
And not listen
obviously
here,
you're not.
Yeah.
Right. So I did not take offense at all. I saw it as a teaching moment, as a learning opportunity, as a way to actually connect, not
Mm-hmm.
to come like to fall further apart.
Sure. Yeah. I appreciate that too. I mean, there were some that, like I said, I mean, and I'm not offended by them or whatever, but there were some that I think did just really take offense.
Yeah.
And I'll make a video and hopefully they'll see it. One of the other reasons that I kept the video around is because I intend on tagging some folks that were, in the apology video that I intend on putting out, just to kind of say, I've had a live discussion. Oh, I wanted to ask you too if it would be okay to even post this on this live on my Facebook. I mean, on
Please.
my YouTube,
Yeah,
and to
please.
give them an opportunity to see the conversation if that was okay with you.
I welcome it.
Awesome, awesome. I appreciate
Okay.
it.
There's definitely still a lot, because there are people in the
Oh,
comments bringing up really good points. I do have to go. I'm sorry, so I'm gonna have to let you go, and maybe we can later on discuss some other topics here that people have brought up that
sure.
do have to have something important to do with this conversation. But again, yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm
I'm
gonna have to
open.
let you go. Thank you. Me too. All right,
All right.
Candace, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Have a good
And
one.
there is USMC. There is a link to my YouTube in my bio. So if you're already following me, so brother, yeah. So go to my link and it'll be up right after we're done. Give me a couple hours because sometimes it takes a while to download.
And thank you everybody on my end for sticking around, and I'm sorry for ignoring your comments, and hope you had a good conversation on your own in the comment section. And yeah, thank you. All right, bye everyone.
Bye bye.